Hi, my name is Komal and I'm marking Helen's work. In front of me, I've got two lesson plans with the rationals. I've got rational for scheme of work, and I've got two different schemes of work. One is for functional skills, level 1, and other is child care. I've also got compare and contrast essay based on these two scheme of work. I look at her rational for scheme of work. She's clearly written it. It's well written, in other words, and she's explained really well who she's teaching, why she's teaching. She's used different theories as well. The only thing I would say that for future, she could mention how these theories are useful to her. I also thought one more thing, that she's mentioned about learning objectives in her rational. I thought this is already written in scheme of work. Maybe she could have mentioned a bit more why she's mentioning this, or any reason to have these learning objectives if she's mentioning them in rational. And how does this overall conclude to the criteria of the assessment or the course? As a matter of fact, are they contributing? Are these learning outcomes contributing, and in what ways? Maybe a bit about, like, a couple of lines about it would have been nice. Apart from that, rational for scheme of work is very well written. Her scheme of work is very detailed. It's really well written. Her aims and objectives are clearly written. We know what sort of assessment she's using. And in terms of classroom activities, she's written it so detailed that if anyone had to pick it up, her scheme of work, and do a lesson plan based on this, I think it'll be really easy to do. Only thing I would say about her scheme of work is her assessment. I think she can work a bit more on the assessment bit. So, for example, the first lesson, which is on 7th of 9th 2015, she said, end of session, they're reflecting back to the learning outcomes. How is she going to assess that? She's talked about individual task and feedback, which is a good thing, and group discussion. But maybe she could add a bit more. Observation could have been part of it. And my only question is, if they're reflecting back, how is she going to assess them? So maybe think more about your assessment, link it to your learning objectives. Look at your learning objectives and then try and make a link between the assessment. Apart from that, this is really well written. Her compare and contrast. Sorry, I've got essays right in front of me, and this recording is done on my laptop as well. So I do apologise if I'm looking here and there. Okay. She's compared. So she's made comparison between English GCSE class with level 2 certification and an introduction to early years education and care. What I've seen is she's clearly mentioned about what she's doing in this essay. She's talked about the 4 key dates as well of the assignments. She's mentioned about how there are different layouts, and how both courses are assessed differently. As academic and English one, she said that students work every term, whereas in vocational there are deadlines every 2 weeks. She's also compared different types of assessments that are used in both. The only thing I would say, that if she could have added why in vocational courses they use different sorts, it would have been a bit more clearer. Apart from that, it's very well written. And then looking at her rational for first lesson, which is rational for influence on learning, very well written. She's given very detailed description of students, classroom, layout, what she's going to be teaching, how she's going to be teaching, why she's teaching, and how it's useful to her. Even her lesson plan is very well written. If I had to go and teach this lesson plan, I think I would be able to do. The only thing I would say, in the lesson plan where there's teaching and learning method, you can elaborate a bit more on it, because it says, for example, for this one, it says presentational teaching method, teacher-led. Talk about the learning style and how are you. I've just made a note here. yeah, how teaching method, how are you going to do it? Are you going to split up into groups? Are they going to be in a class together? Or however your, what sort of teaching method you're going to use. That would be same for her second lesson as well, which is on smart targets, to understand smart targets. Again, the lesson plan is done really well, and she's written about the resources, what sort of assessment she's going to use. I would, formative assessment and group discussion, formative. She's given outline of what sort of assessment she's carrying out, which is a good thing, and it helps to know. A bit more detail would have been better. Again, her rational is written really well for this as well. She's given really good description, excellent description. Everything is, she's even mentioned about the time of that activity that she's chosen and why. So I think overall it's really well written. It was really clear to read her work and understand things. So yeah.